Hi, readers. You're probably like, wow, Miss A is really going crazy during quarantine. Why is she wearing sunglasses inside? Well, the reason I'm wearing sunglasses inside today is to talk about how when you wear sunglasses, the world looks a little bit different, right? It has a certain shade, especially if you wear some cool, funky ones that are pink or have the colors. But do you ever notice how the world really looks different when you put on different lenses? Well, the reason I bring that up is because reading biographies is just like reading with sunglasses on. We need to read with different lenses. Sometimes you're reading with the lens of a story, and other times you're reading with the lens to learn information. So today I want to teach you that readers of narrative nonfiction read through different lenses. One of those lenses, of course, is the lens of a story. We've already talked about that. But narrative nonfiction is still nonfiction, which means it's meant to teach you and so that you learn things. So another lens through which readers of narrative nonfiction view text is the lens of reading to learn information. So let's talk about that with our story. So remember in our previous lessons when we first introduced narrative nonfiction, we talked about how it's a story, how you talk about traits and motivations, needs, but we also want to read to learn information. Think to yourself, what topics am I learning about? So in Malala, who is Malala Yousafzai, not only am I learning about Malala herself, I'm learning a lot about many other things. For example, and you can stop and jot these just like how I am, I'm learning about where she lives in the world. I'm learning about the Middle East. I'm also learning a lot about her religion and culture, right? So the Islamic religion and culture. I'm also learning a lot about different languages and names. So even though I'm learning about Malala and her life and her actions and her traits and motivations, I'm also learning a lot about a lot of other worldly things. So as you are reading your narrative nonfiction books, I want you to think to yourself, what am I learning about history? What am I learning about a time period? What am I learning about a culture, a place, different beliefs? Ask yourself that. So in addition to learning about different topics as information, you can also you can get main ideas and supporting details from this based on that information. So let me show you how we would do that today by continuing to read our book, Who is Malala Yousafzai? So remember last time we read the book, we started off by learning about who Malala was, right, in the introduction and why this book is written about her and why she's known. We learned about when she was born and her family. And recently, we read about how times were starting to get a little bit dangerous and how we learned about that terrorist group, the Taliban, that they heard were starting to do really bad things and especially not treat women fairly. So let's read chapter 4 called Dangerous Times. When Malala was little, there were many tourists in the Swat Valley. Some came for the summer music and dance festivals. Others sat by the Swat River or climbed in the mountains. Often, they did not dress the same as the people in Swat. Malala knew that women and girls in different parts of the world followed different customs. Malala also knew that the Swat region was not as modern as some places in Pakistan. There were women in the big city of Islamabad who dressed like the women in Europe and the United States that she had seen on TV. Most women and girls in Mingor did not dress that way. They wrapped their bodies in scarves or cloaks when they went out. Remember how we talked about how she had to be fully covered when she went out? Remember, no wearing like shorts or dresses and bathing suits like we do. They wore headscarves. Here's a picture to help you picture that. In her mother's mountain village, women often dressed in even more traditional way. They chose to wear a cloth garment called a burqa whenever they left the house. The burqa covered their whole body and face with a cutout just so they could see. In 2007, Malala was 10 years old. By this time, members of the Taliban were taking over the Swat Valley. Remember, the Taliban is that really dangerous terrorist group. Now they're coming into her area. They said that all women had to wear burqas. It was required. The Taliban wanted to take away freedom from all women. On a radio station, a Taliban man was shouting frightening things. He announced that, besides wearing burqas, girls and women in Mingora should stay at home. They can no longer go to the market alone. They could only go out with a male relative. Women who did not follow these rules would be punished. Was that all? No. Women would not be able to vote. They could not hold jobs. There would no longer be female doctors, and women weren't allowed to go to male doctors. They could not go to hospitals. That meant there was no way for sick women to be treated. Music and dancing were banned. All televisions and CDs and computers would be burned. Only religious books could be read. Girls' schools would be destroyed if they were not closed. Teachers and principals who continued to teach girls would be punished. Wow, so I'm going to pause here for a second and stop and jot my main idea and supporting details, something I'm gathering here. Remember, main idea is a statement. So I'm gathering here that the Taliban is a very scary and dangerous terrorist group that impose strict rules. So I'm going to write that. So I'm writing, the Taliban is a dangerous terrorist group that impose strict rules unfair to women. Just fix my typos. There we go. Make it a little bit smaller so I have room. Now we know we can't just make a statement without giving supporting details, but we definitely have a lot of details to support what we were talking about. So I'm going to go back in my book and just reference. So, for example, they could had to stay at home. They could not go to the market. They could not vote. They could not go to the doctor or hospital. No school. And there's a lot of other things, but these are just a few of the examples of how the Taliban is a dangerous terror group that impose strict rules. The man was saying that good Muslims would never allow girls to go to school. Malala knew that wasn't true. Her family and friends and neighbors were all good Muslims. They were deeply religious. They prayed every day. They also believed that every child should be educated. At her religious school, Malala had learned that Muslims believed in peace and kindness to others. One evening, a man came to Malala's house and told Ziauddin to close his girls' high school. Malala's father refused. Malala was afraid. What if something happened to her father? Other schools were destroyed. The Taliban were breaking into homes. They were searching for illegal books. They were destroying TVs and video games. They closed the movie theaters and places where people had gone to listen to music and dance. So what I'm learning here about one of the topic is the religion and culture of Islam and Muslim is that majority, 99.9% of the people are peaceful and believe in kind things and believe in education and equal rights. But there's this one group of people who are really, really bad people who don't believe that. I think everybody should follow what they believe. Female doctors and teachers were leaving the area to find work in safer places. Women were no longer at the market and men were afraid. So many of the shops were closing. Men were no longer allowed to shave. Barber shops were closing too. Men with guns, Taliban members were everywhere. People were frightened to go outside. Ziauddin kept his schools open, but many students were afraid of the Taliban and stayed home. At the end of 2007, the Pakistan Army arrived to stop the Taliban. Mingora and most of the Swat Valley became a war zone. There was bombing at night and during the day. Most people stayed in their homes, but some children continued to go to school. Malala was one of them. So I just want you to pause here and think about that. Imagine being in your home and there being war and fighting going on all the time. And just something as simple as going to school was so dangerous that you could die and either be really hurt by one of these Taliban members in these terrorist groups or by a bomb that was going off just because you wanted to go to school. Fighting between the Pakistani soldiers and the Taliban went on through much of 2008. So this is going on for over a year. After many months, it seemed like that the army was winning. Everybody hoped that the Taliban was gone for good. Life would soon get back to normal. The Pakistan army moved out of the Swat Valley, but the Taliban had not gone away. The radio threats had started again. People who did not follow all orders were severely punished. Shops were burned. By the end of 2008, more than 150 girls' schools in Mingora were destroyed. Malala realized her school was in danger. She also knew that she was lucky. If her school closed, her father would still continue to teach her. He would find math and science books and literature for her to read. But most girls in Mingora were not as lucky as she was. What would happen to them? And we're going to figure out what happens to them when we continue next time. So, readers, do you see how not only can we read our narrative nonfiction as a story talking about the struggles and challenges of the main subject and the people in the story, but we also need to use it to learn information about different topics such as the world and history. And then you need to create ideas and supporting details, main idea and supporting details with that information. So readers, what I want you to do today is you are going to create a slide in the template that I'm providing you, just like the one I did. I would like you to list some of the different topics you are learning about in your narrative nonfiction, and then give me one main idea with some supporting details. All right, readers, off you go.